Hi, I'm Leah, and welcome to the Workforce Advantage. And I have the pleasure today of interviewing Hellbender. So we have Brett Phillips from Hellbender. How are you, Brett?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to have you. I'm really, really excited to learn a little bit more about Hellbender, what you all are doing in the workplace. And you've been up for about 4 years now, right?
That's right. Yeah, we're getting close to our 4 year anniversary and things are going good.
Right.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a bit about Hellbender and what you do.
Perfect. So I am the Chief Business Development Officer over there at Hellbender, and we do a lot of things. We particularly specialize in what they call on-edge AI hardware development with an emphasis on computer vision applications. And then in addition to that, we also do outsourced product development where we do all the engineering services. And then we also do manufacturing, which is particularly unique. And as a little bit of foreshadowing, right, manufacturing is so important for any sort of edge application.
Right.
Yeah.
So you brought up Edge AI, right? So tell those who may have heard this term for the first time, what is Edge AI?
Yeah, so it's cutting edge, pun intended. But yeah, no, in all seriousness, right, the traditional way that we do AI is all cloud-based, right, which is why we're building data centers left and right. And that's great. And that's really, that's obviously incredibly powerful and useful. But what's happening is whenever you start to deploy AI at scale, you all of a sudden get your first AWS bill or whatever cloud hosting platform you use and realize that it's actually quite process intense to run AI and it's quite expensive. And so a lot of companies and pretty much every industry out there is trying to figure out how they can have their cake and eat it too, right? How can we actually use AI at scale, but also not, literally destroy our Christmas bonuses because of our cloud bills. Right. And so that's where everyone started to move things to the edge. And what that literally means is that in the actual device, in the actual thing that you are interacting with the real world to use AI, we literally put little compute modules, basically little tiny computers, inside those devices. And so depending on the complexity or the size of the AI model you're trying to deploy, you can either run it on the compute module or we can add an AI chip, also known as accelerator chip, also known as a TPU or an NPU. Lots of different words are pretty much the same thing. And then that way you sort of get more horsepower to run those specific AI models, but again, in the edge, in the device itself. So then therefore you can run AI with no cloud, with no internet connectivity. Or you can run AI in a much more capitally efficient way, where instead of sending everything back to the cloud, you just send the important parts back to the cloud, dramatically reducing your cost to send that data, and then, of course, the cost to store that data as well.
Right. So if I was someone that said, okay, I get it, Edge AI, I see why it's a thing, right? But what really made Edge AI and Hellbender's technology stand out beyond cloud AI?
So first of all, I would say that it is very much very rare to really do edge AI these days. It's still the very, very early stages of that. And so in one way, what makes Hellbender unique is the fact that we're able to do it at all is really a unique skill set. Like really our only competition are big Chinese companies right now. But beyond that, right, I think that edge AI, so there's four main reasons why people move to do things on the edge to, compared to traditional cloud-based AI processing. It's S squared, C squared. S squared is speed and security, and then C squared is cost and communications, right? So speed, the big benefit there is that anytime you're sending all of your information back to the cloud, doing your processing, and then sending the answer back to where you need the answer, you have a delay.
Right.
And it sort of depends on the complexity and the size of what you're actually trying to send back and forth, but there is a delay, right? And so sometimes you have certain applications where a delay is literally deadly. And so you can't afford that delay. By doing things on the edge, we can basically, remove that delay where that real-time processing happens and then a real-time logic or a real-time action happens in conjunction. So that's speed.
Yeah.
Then security, right? This is a big one for government and really outside of government as well. When you're a traditional cloud-based, AI processing, you're sending everything back to the cloud, and that is a vulnerability. right? So with doing things on the edge, right, we can now either not send anything to the cloud, or we can only send very, very specific pieces of information that are not quite as confidential back to the cloud, right? So that's that speed and security. Cost is an obvious one. We just talked about that. And then communications is sort of related to speed, but it's also the ability to, actually run AI models in a completely air-gapped environment. And what I mean by that is if you're in an environment where there is no connectivity, you have no Wi-Fi, you have no GPS, you have no whatever, no cellular, we can still run AI models in those environments. And so all like those four main reasons are why people move to the edge. And Hellbender is one of the few companies in the world that can actually do edge, because edge is such a rare combination of both software and hardware. And there's an old saying that hardware is hard, right? And it's very true. And AI, at least from a macro level viewpoint, in my opinion, has really widened that gap. Software has become a little bit more easier, a little bit more commoditized, and hardware is actually becoming harder because now we can do so much more with the actual hardware. And now, because everyone is starting to figure out how to do edge, there's so much more demand on that as well.
Thank you. So can you give me an example of some products that are already using Edge AI?
I sure can. So we have lots of different products that are using Edge AI. Everything from, a camera that they use to, we call it Facebook for cows. That's not how they call it, but they deploy it on these ATVs and they drive around to monitor the herd, the health of the herd. And as it grows, they also monitor the health of the prairie and the field as well. But that's a really good example of like they're in these very remote environments. They literally don't have connectivity. And so, but they have a pretty sophisticated model that they want to deploy on these cameras, and they need to be able to operate them with zero connectivity. And so that's what they do, is they actually deploy on the edge. That's a really good example. The other one we have, which is a really good example of the cost savings, there's a mapping company, and they've hired us to develop their product, and we were able to dramatically reduce their operating costs by doing things on the edge by an order of magnitude. The original product was doing most of the processing in the cloud to the tune of almost 50 cents per mile. And we were able to get it down to 1 penny per mile by moving things to the edge with no degradation, no loss of performance. And so oftentimes, right, you have customers that come to us because they already have a very valuable business prop, a very valuable business model, but they need to figure out how to optimize the operating cost of that. And edge is usually a very good answer for that.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah.
So how does Edge AI open possibilities for smaller companies like our regional manufacturers?
So I think it opens it up because it's forcing people to get very, very, sort of specific around hardware and around electronic manufacturing. Whereas with traditional, cloud-based AI, it's literally you're either a software company, right, or you're a big data center. And there's really nothing else in between, because that's really all you sort of need. But with Edge AI, it's really opening it up, sort of for a renaissance of a lot of these sort of old school skill sets, right? Obviously, you see in this video we have going through here, we do have, relatively modern processes in terms of like, printed circuit board assembly. We use a pretty sophisticated cobotic work cell assembly line as well, where a bunch of robots are whirring around. But there's a real trickle-down effect in terms of like, all the various suppliers and vendors that we need to consume to make these products. So a good example would be like plastic mold injectors, right? And so they're ironically between here, Pittsburgh and Cleveland and up to Detroit, there are just a whole host of small shops that do that. And so now all of a sudden, we can really, bring those skill sets into really cutting edge technology. Right. But other than that, I would say that, you're just really getting a lot more technicians, a lot more, people that have very physical gifts and physical skill sets. It's not so much you have to only be a PhD in computer science to be able to work in AI. Now you can really just be, a traditional technician and be able to find a home working on AI products because there's such a physical, hardware component.
And that's good, because that's actually going into my next question about what does this mean for the workforce, right? So what skill set or needs does a person need to have in order to fit this mold under Edge AI?
Yeah, so I think on one level, you need someone who knows their way around, hardware,
Right.
right? And the good news from that perspective is that the barrier to entry there has never been lower. Raspberry Pi is a great example of a company that, you can just for the price of a few $100 have a really sophisticated, set of hardware that you can play around with.
So wait, what is Raspberry Pi?
Raspberry Pi is this company out of the UK that is a electronics manufacturer. They sell a lot of products, but their main products are what they call compute modules. And if someone's super technical that's listening, they're probably going to cringe, but I'm going to oversimplify it. It's basically a little computer. Like it's basically a little tiny computer that comes almost like business card size. And the reason why Raspberry Pi has gotten so big over the years is one, they have really good documentation. It's really, really good documentation. And that's actually important for people that are trying to like figure out how to work with it. You need sort of a handbook, right? And a lot of that information traditionally has been very sort of like esoteric and like hard to really understand and decipher. You have to like, scour these random forums to figure out how to do things. But Raspberry Pi is a world-class documentation, and so it makes it very accessible for the average person to figure out how to log into it, how to play around with it, how to get it working. And then, of course, it's really ubiquitous in terms of like how you can implement it. So people have done everything from like make their own home security cameras to, make little gadgets that drop down spiders whenever you walk through the door. Very, very on season for Halloween. But really, it's really whatever you want to do with it, because it literally is a little tiny computer that you can stick into various little boxes and do all sorts of different applications with it. And so to answer your question, that is definitely one big skill set that we're looking for, is a familiarity with hardware. And not just hardware sort of conceptually, right? But hardware in the sense of like you've burnt your fingers on a soldering iron. Right? Like that's a real skill set that is hard to be gained any other way than just doing it. That is truly experience. But now you don't have to go to a college or spend all this money, to go through a training program to get that. You can do it on your own relatively cheaply and relatively quickly. And so that's a big one. That'd probably be the biggest one I would say from a technician standpoint. We could talk about from a software standpoint.
So if I'm someone that's like, man, I hear this guy talking about Hellbender. I hear him talking about Edge AI. I'm really interested. I would love to learn more, but not just because I want more information, but I really want to develop the skills I need to have to work for an organization or work for a company like this, right? And I know you said that first we need to start with some software training and do some hardware training. What would that look like? So me coming off the street, what kind of training would I get?
So I would again say that it's never been easier to learn these things on your own, particularly with AI. Like this is actually one of the biggest benefits of AI. And so I would challenge whoever really wants to do that, go to ChatGPT, go to Claude, whichever one you prefer, and type in that question. Right? Because what better way to learn how to work with AI than to use AI to figure out how to do it, And I mean, it's sort of a joke, but it's really quite serious because again, familiarity and experience is what we really value more than anything else. Because you can have kids or adults that are coming out of college, right? And if they've never actually done it before, it's really no different than someone who hasn't gone to college. Of course, there's certain differences. But from a company like ours, we really value experience. And that's something that you can get on your own. Like a lot of times now, it's like, send me your portfolio. Like, I don't really care about your resume. Send me your portfolio. Show me what's something you've actually done, right? That's much more valuable than, just getting degrees, right? At least in our experience. So yeah, other than that, I would say get some real familiarity with how AI works by doing it. Buy some Raspberry Pis, start tinkering around with that, like do various projects, understand sort of the unique combination of software and hardware that comes with Edge AI, and make mistakes. That's the other thing too, right? Because I mean, one of the unique things about Hellbender in particular, and this is mostly born out of, our leadership being almost entirely engineering. We really sort of celebrate mistakes, and we really sort of celebrate when things go wrong, because that means that we are figuring something out. And a lot of companies come to us because they can't figure it out, right? Not to be super cheesy, but it's like Meet the Robinsons, right? Where it's like, yeah, you figured out the wrong way to do it.
Right.
Great, we learned something, right?
Right.
And so that's really quite beneficial. But that's something that, you know, individuals that are interested in getting involved in this space, like, go do that. Go do it on your own time, right?
Yeah.
Instead of spending all this money to go to school, just spend your time and money doing something that's going to be like sort of, you know, really teach you and practice what actually happens.
So that's easy for Hellbender, right? Because you've already bought into the idea that you do not have to have this traditional pathway to enter into the workforce. You just need to have the skill. You need to have the grit. You need to have the want to, right?
Yep.
But a lot of it, that's not necessarily the testimony of every employer that may be hiring for roles like this. So what are some things or misconceptions that you would say to those employers to say, you know what, maybe consider this other alternative pathway to bring in tech talent, whether it's an entry-level role or a mid-level tech role?
Yeah, so what I would say to those other employers is that, I guess there's a lot of things to say to other employers. I would say that, again, don't get blinded by resumes and certificates, because I think a lot of times, or degrees, a lot of times those are more reflective of your ability to suffer than it is your ability to actually like learn or be productive. And again, I would certainly give much more credence to things that people have actually done and created, as opposed to things that people have just survived, right? And I will fully admit that I'm saying this as someone who has multiple degrees, right? Yeah. So like, I'm sort of preaching from experience here, but also at the same token, right? Like, I learned way more from starting my own company than I ever did from going to law school or going to MBA school or going to undergrad, any of that kind of stuff. So it's just so much more valuable to do things than it is to learn about things.
Right.
That's one piece of advice. The other piece of advice I would give is, yeah, I think there's, well, I think my general advice for employers is to hire fast and fire faster. But that's a little bit of a different segue there.
Right.
But,
give us more. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, so this is where you start to get into like sort of, you know, management in general.
Yeah.
Right. I think that most people, I won't say all people, but most people can be on their best behavior during the interview process.
Right.
And ultimately too, like, this is actually a very valuable problem to try to solve. I don't think it truly is solvable. Like, how do you actually figure out if candidate A, B, or C, if they all are relatively equal, which one will actually be the right choice? And in my opinion, I think the answer is you can't. Like, you literally don't know. And so that's why I say hire fast but fire faster, in the sense of like, you get them on board, you give them a few months, you'll know pretty quickly, right? And I think as humans, and I certainly relate to this as a human with empathy, right, and a heart, it's tough to do that. But I think that's ultimately the job of the manager, is to make those tough decisions. And instead of, and I think a lot of that's ego driven, because we don't like admitting that we were wrong. I was wrong by hiring you, right? I should have picked candidate B or whatever that is. But I think that that's just, you know, obviously faulty logic. And so that's why I would say hire fast, because you don't really know. Do the amount of diligence that you can, and then figure it out when them actually on the job, and you'll be able to tell if it was legit or not. So that's my piece on that.
So you brought up your multiple degrees.
Yeah.
You've also brought up that you had a company before,
Yeah.
right? So tell us a little bit about your degrees, your pathway, and what brought you. How did you go from point A, from a law degree, right, to point B, doing law and?
Yeah. So it sounds silly, but it's really quite accurate. I went to law school at the same time that I got my MBA. And for me, I've always done sales. I've always done business development. I grew up as an Army brat, so I was always the new kid. And you get really good at meeting people and you know, talking to people and befriending people. And that's really what sales is at the end of the day. And so, yeah, for me, and this is very oversimplified, but I knew that I wanted to do business in one form or another. And so for me, as a wannabe athlete, right, the only way I could ever compete with real games was if I knew the rules better than everyone else, right? I wasn't that physically gifted, so I had to sort of outthink everyone else. And to me, the game of business, it was the same way, right? And what are the rules of business? Well, those are the laws. And so I literally went to law school to understand the rules of the game better than others. And so after that, right, I did a quick stint in a traditional law setting. I did not enjoy it. I left that pretty quickly. I then specialized in helping international companies enter into the American market. And then I got the founder bug and I started my own company. I did that for a few years. And then I ended up sort of stumbling into this unique skill set of being like the biz dev guy and the lawyer guy on the team. And then how I got to Hellbender. So I was actually out in Denver for about a decade. And my wife is from Beaver County and we kept having kids. We needed to get some help, which is a big part of it. You need to come back, be near family.
You have to take care of these kids.
That's right. It's hard. It's very hard. My wife's job's way harder than mine, being a stay-at-home mom. So, it seriously is.
I'm so happy you recognize it. You're such a good husband, right?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, like, it was one of those things that when we moved to Pittsburgh, you know, because my oldest is 9 years old and she's been fortunate enough to be stay-at-home since he was born. And when we moved to Pittsburgh, you know, we bought a house and I was fixing up the house and my wife had actually gone back to work for a very short period of time. And so for the first time in 9 years, we flipped our roles, right? I was staying at home and she was working. And
so you saw it first.
Well, so that's exactly it. Yeah. I didn't appreciate it as much as I did. I mean, I knew conceptually it was hard, right? But I didn't really understand it. And this sort of goes back to the whole experience. You got to actually have to do things to really understand it. Right. And
maybe every husband
I think
needs to have a period.
I think
where they be a stay-at-home dad and they come back to the workforce with such grit because they're like, we're not doing that.
I can't do that. I mean, seriously, there was about a 3-month period where our roles had flipped. And I'm so thankful for two things. One, that I got that time. But two, my wife actually came to me and said, hey, I think you should go back to work because it was hard for her. That's what was very unique is that it was really hard for her to miss all these events and all these activities going on with the kids. And so she had a real appreciation for what, like, you know, traditionally the man sacrifices. And when she came to me and said that, I said, oh, thank God, I'm going to go crazy. I am like this close. I don't know how you do it. But no, in all seriousness, it is way, way harder. But anyway, so when we moved here, well, let me back up. When we were still in Denver, we were thinking about moving. And about 3 years ago, ChatGPT came out on my radar. And it was a sort of a watershed moment for me in particular, because I was in the software space and I was in the legal transactional space. And those are both perfect for LLMs, large language models, which is what everyone traditionally thinks of when they think of AI. They're really talking about large language models. And it was sort of a oh crap moment for me, where I realized I saw the writing on the wall and I was freaking out. And I remember it so vividly. It was like 8:00 in the evening. And my wife was like, what are you freaking out about? And I was like, you don't understand. Look at this. And she's like, I don't understand. I was like, you don't understand. You know, it's like, it's just like, it just looks like a chat box. And I'm like, no, it's way more than that. And she's like, you're weird. And I'm like, okay, it's fine. And so anyways, but I saw it right away, right? And it was very much I need to go figure out a way, because I also knew that was going to be the worst it was ever going to be. And it was already pretty damn good at that point. And so I needed to get into an industry that had a moat. And I remembered from living here that Pittsburgh had really deep hardware and robotics roots. I didn't really fully understand it at the time, but I knew that there was really deep subject matter expertise in that. And so we decided to move back, and I found out about Hellbender and chased Brian, our CEO, down and basically annoyed him until he hired me.
Love it. See, I asked this question because a lot of folks are not aware that the Pittsburgh Technology Council actually has a tech registered apprenticeship program. And a lot of the candidates that are in the candidate pool, they may have this experience in construction, right? So we had a candidate that was a supervisor in construction. He did really well, but it was really hard on his body. So he said, I wanted to get into technology and I wanted to get into it fast, right? Because again, I think once COVID hit, a lot of ChatGPT started to become a lot more popular. Technology started to become a lot more popular. People are like, man, especially those who are getting a little older, like this wear and tear is not the move, right? So he wanted to get into technology. He went through a tech boot camp where, again, this is now this entry-level role. But he had mid or senior level experience being the supervisor at his construction company, right? So he got hired on through one of our partners, Engine. They hired him. Not only is he done well, but he's excelling and he's surpassing some of the individuals. And no shade to those who went to school and get a degree, right? But he's surpassing those individuals because he came with the want to, he came with the drive.
Right.
He really came with the experience,
Mm-hmm.
just not that certificate or degree, right? Mm-hmm. So I say that to say the Pittsburgh Technology Council has also, through Apprenti PGH, launched a new tech role, which is an AI associate role. It's a mid-level role. So any candidate who goes through this program, they must already have some tech experience. They must already have some tech knowledge, and they need to have a certification in Python, right? Before they even go through the program to get hired on through a registered tech apprenticeship. Again, a lot of companies are like, hey, we need to hire someone. We need to hire someone really quickly. How can that person be successful at a company like yours and focusing on Edge AI?
Yeah, so I think you already identified some of the key components, right? Which is sort of the soft skills side of it. And it doesn't surprise me that someone that had some real world working experience can make the transition and really excel in that position, because I think a lot of it is really the soft side of the house. Like hard skills are a certain limitation for various people, and for certain roles, you have to have a certain level of hard skills. But beyond that, I think soft skills play a really massive role. So then, having a literally a can-do attitude. I know it sounds cliche, but it is literally quite useful in the sense of even if I don't know exactly how to do this, I can figure it out. Right. Or I can figure out how to get help. Right. And so that goes a far way. And then on top of that, sort of having a certain level of self-awareness is really quite key, because the worst thing you can do is pretend like you know. Right. And I know it's scary and vulnerable to say that I don't know, but it really proves that you're aware of yourself and you're being honest, which is another big factor. But beyond that, I think it sort of goes back to what we talked about previously, like just having experience and having, familiarity with all the various hardware components that go into making any sort of device. Like understanding how heat can impact and really, affect, the operation of a particular device is something that you can certainly read about in a book, but until you've actually had a box melt under heat because you didn't do a good enough heat sink or whatever it is, that's something that's really hard to learn from an academic exercise and sort of where that level is. But again, you can do that on your own. Do a little project with your kids if you happen to have kids, or do projects with your pets if you have those. You can sort of combine your interests outside of work and then also gain really valuable skill sets and experience that can be applicable for a company like ours to help.
Great. So how can employers like Hellbender partner with apprenticeship models to diversify and grow their AI talent pipeline?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and it's something that we really are very conscious about and how we solve that. And so I think the first answer is obviously working with organizations like the PTC. Right. And I think in that vein, being more involved in sort of the curriculum that you're applying to this AI associate type of role, and making sure that it's really sort of, we don't want to be super selfish and only tailor it to Hellbender needs, but I think just having a little bit of input on that and understanding how certain skill sets, you already obviously referenced Python, that's great. That is very valuable. I would even add Rust to that as well as a new software language that's particularly relevant for edge applications. But in addition to that, you do have the hardware component of learning how to do soldering on printed circuit boards and do all the various connectors and dealing with the complexities of making hardware would be very valuable. But, beyond that, I just think that it is just partnering with organizations like PTC to make sure that we're involved with the training curriculum, and then we're also involved with the actual hiring process.
Here's a fun fact, right? We're really transparent on what these individuals will be learning while they're in training. We are able to tailor at least 20% of the curriculum training.
Perfect.
And without having to change the occupation.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, perfect.
So I know we're getting the time, right? This is fun.
I'm just getting started.
I'm just getting started too. I think they can hear us a little bit longer. I would say 2-hour podcast.
That's right.
Are we agreeing to that?
Right. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But if you were to give us just one final piece of advice, right, that you would share with employers and policymakers on trying to prepare for an AI-driven workforce, what would that be?
Okay, so I'm actually going to break this down into two different answers.
Yes.
Because I think the answers are very different if you're talking about employers or if you're talking about policymakers.
Correct.
Let me start with policymakers, right? How do I say this without getting canceled?
Get canceled.
We need to, we need to stop having grandparents figure out how to actually handle the policies that control technology. Like that's the true, that's really the crux of the problem. And I actually worked at state capitol in law school. I was a legislative intern. And so I got to see firsthand just how technically inept a lot of these policymakers are. And it's not anything it's not anything wrong with them individually. Right. It's just sort of they're a product of their times.
Right.
Right. And it's also like I'm already at the age now where I even understand that the younger kids are more proficient than I am in certain things, which is a very terrifying existential thing to comprehend. But beyond that, I really do think that we need to have policymakers that really understand what it is they're trying to, legislate and control. And obviously, it's not so easy just to say, get younger politicians in there. I'm not so naive as to say that, but I think it is sort of a reflection of the policymakers need to have much more input from experts. We really got to get the right panel of people that are actually telling the policymakers what these words actually mean and what the impact actually is to then drive the actual policies that they're drafting and passing. And so I think that's a huge problem. And it's not just for AI, it's technology in general. But I do think that given sort of the overwhelming power and conversely danger of AI, right, it's really, really important and really time sensitive that we do that. So that would be my answer for the policymakers. Yeah. For the employers, I think they need to realize that AI is here to stay.
Right.
I think a lot of people make the comparison with the .com bubble. And I think it's actually a really good comparison if you talk about what the stock market's doing right now. Right. But if you actually really take a step back and think about what happened with the .com bubble, yes, there was a bubble in terms of valuations, right? And there were plenty of companies that should not have been anywhere near valued what they were, but .com and the internet never went away. Right? I don't know about you, but I'm on the internet way too much right now, right? And I know better, right?
So do I.
Yeah, so I mean, it never went away, right? There were certainly companies that rose and fall, all that kind of stuff, but the actual underlying paradigm shift of a .com, of the internet, never went away and has only really gotten more entrenched. I think that's the exact same thing we're seeing with AI right now. I think just like in the 90s, you have certain companies that are overvalued, certain companies that are undervalued, certain companies that are probably going to fail despite being worth billions of dollars on paper. But the underlying paradigm shift of AI is definitely not going to go away.
Right.
And so I don't think we're that close. This is an answer for both employers and employees. I don't think we're that close from AI replacing people or companies. But I do think that people or companies that know how to leverage AI will replace those that don't. And so that's my answer to that is get with the times, or the times will get on without you.
Or the times will get on without
you. That's right.
Right. So, anything else you would like to share about Hellbender? What new products you are working on now?
Yeah, so thank you very much for that. I love doing shameless plugs. And so Hellbender is really at a unique time in our history. For the past 3.5 years, we've been primarily, engineering services and manufacturing for edge AI customers. But now we're really excited to talk about what's next. So we're now starting to come out with our own Hellbender branded products. Our goal is to sort of provide off-the-shelf products for the physical AI world, which is another way to say it, edge AI, by the way. Oh man, there's so many terms out there. It's hard to keep track. But that's really our goal, is to be able to sell products that, everyone can then go buy and start running and experimenting and using in their own edge or a physical AI or robotics application, whatever that is. So that's really exciting. We're starting to sell physical Hellbender products. And then in addition to that, we're starting to do computer vision as a service. So what does that mean? What that means is that more and more this is particularly relevant for large enterprise customers, right? They know that they have a problem and they know that the technology is at least there to be able to solve it. They conceptually understand that we're now at the time where it's doable. And it's this unique combination of it's a software model of some sort, but because of the particular problem, there has to be a physical component. Like they have to have, usually it's cameras, right? It doesn't have to be cameras, but usually it's cameras. They have to have a physical component. And so these large enterprise customers, there are 50 companies that can solve the software part of it. They have a model, right? They can deploy to do that. But those, and this is not anything unusual, most software companies don't do hardware. And so the big enterprise customer does not want to solve this problem by committee. They don't want to have to go hire a software company, and then they don't want to have to go hire a hardware company, and then they're just pointing fingers at each other whenever it doesn't work, right? So more and more customers are coming to us because they know we can do the hardware side of it, and we also can do the software side of it. And so now we're coming out with computer vision as a service where we provide the whole end-to-end package that has a physical hardware component, has an AI model component, and we're providing it all as a service, good old-fashioned subscriptions. That's what's really exciting. And the good news is, because I'm a consumer as well, and I understand the pain of paying something every single month just to do it. Right. And again, I have an MBA. I get the economics. It's very attractive. Especially if you go through a budget, right? Yeah,
the
exactly.
First thing that get cut whenever you're doing your budget are subscriptions.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I get the pain, and like everything's become subscription based, right? Whether it should or it shouldn't is a very good debate. But one of the unique things about computer vision as a service is that because we're literally deploying AI models and we're looking at something, there's a certain level of degradation as time goes on. Because let me give you a good example, right? If I'm deploying cameras to look and track, make it up, right? Inventory that is coming through a warehouse, right? Just by the very definition of, well, first of all, the one constant in the universe is change. Right, those particular packages, those particular materials, they will slowly change over time. And because models are so domain specific in terms of we recognize the pair of scissors when it's red, but if next year the manufacturer changes it to blue, the model won't recognize it as well. So we continuously have to update the model to ensure that the accuracy remains. The reason why I bring this up is because it actually makes sense to pay us a subscription. Because otherwise it'll degrade. Otherwise it'll degrade. We have to literally continuously update the model to make sure that we're taking into account the changes of whatever it is we're trying to look at. So it really is a subscription that makes sense. It's not just some MBA saying we can make more money.
Right. So thanks, Brett, for that. Thank you for coming and sharing some information about Hellbender and Edge AI, right? I believe I am more proficient in Edge AI now, having had interviewed you.
Good. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yes, thank you. So I want to thank you all for joining us for this episode of the Workforce Advantage. Please stay tuned. We're running this AI series. So I'm excited to bring more companies, more cutting edge material. Thank you.